My name is Janet Cornell. I'm currently running my business, Senior Care Administrator Coaching. My experience was I ran eight group homes for about 14 years. So, and I'm on the ALEC committee, and I'm also on the CALA board.
I'm Katie Mickey. I'm with the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. I'm a program manager. I have been an ombudsman for about 7 years and cover the Denver metro area.
So, Janet.
Certainly. What we wanted to talk to today about is CDPHE gets complaints sometimes that should have been handled at the facility, and that's really a time waster for them. They do vet the process, and then they do know that it probably should not have been filed, that kind of thing. What I wanted to tell you is that the complaints that usually come in are from residents. They complain, the family complains, staff complain, maybe after they leave or while they're currently working there, and then your external service providers can file a complaint. Hospice, home care, all of those. They file it formally with this state, and then this state is obligated to follow up. You probably don't want to be on that radar screen unless, for gross negligence, you deserve to be on that radar screen, but for tit for tat stuff, you don't want to be on that. So that's what the presentation today is, to tell you guys, how do you avoid that? There's certain strategies you can do internally to avoid having complaints filed with the state. One of the first things, Katie's going to go over what her role is as the ombudsman.
Just a quick little overview for anybody who might not be familiar with the Ombudsman Program. Is anybody out there not familiar with the Ombudsman or what we do? Okay, I see one hand in the back. That's good that everybody else is familiar with what the Ombudsman does. I'm happy to see that. So we are resident right advocates. We're a federally mandated program. Any licensed assisted living or skilled nursing home is going to have an assigned ombudsman. We are expressed interest advocates, not best interest advocates, meaning whatever the resident is expressing they want or wanting us to advocate for, that is our job to do. So it may not always be in the best interest of your resident, but that's not what we're there to decide. We're there to carry their message and advocate for them. We are permission-based and resident-directed, so we will not share information with you as a provider unless we have permission from the resident or their legal decision maker to do so. And everything that we talk about with the resident is confidential, again, unless we have that express permission from them to share with you guys what their concerns are and then try to work together to resolve that. So we are really there for the resident, but we are also a resource to you as providers. We provide free staff training. If you have a difficult situation happening in your home, let's say maybe a new resident moved in and they're just not jiving with the rest of your folks and you're kind of concerned about the path that that's going down, contact your ombudsman, get them involved, pick their brain for how to kind of work through that and help to make sure that all of your residents are happy and you avoid the dreaded complaint to the health department.
So we've put a PowerPoint up that basically gives some ideas, and then we would also like to hear from you guys what you all do to help support your environment. But it really does start with day one, and as an administrator, it's important that you do a thorough assessment to know, one, if you can provide the services to the resident and that you don't oversell those services. You need to establish an open relationship from day one. Business cards, overhand them out, over-encourage people to call you 24/7, 365, or email you, or whoever is responsible to be on call for grievances, concerns, complaints. Also, make sure that you're doing thorough care plans. Get a group involved in the care plan process, the resident, their family, maybe really good friends, so you can start to learn what's important to them. The little simple things sometimes are what causes complaints. One of the major complaints that's actually called in is the physical environment not having the right temperature. So it would be nice to know, how do you prefer your room? Do you like it warmer? Do you like it colder? I mean, these little things really do cause concern. to our residents. So sometimes just doing a complete care plan and asking those little questions that sometimes might feel trivial. I can be honest with you, I got a call, I had a complaint survey once because a resident called and said we were not providing enough coffee. And I mean, we were going through cans and cans of Folgers on every day. And so when the health department came in and saw that we were constantly making coffee, it was not a found complaint. But I mean, these are things like, if it's important to your resident, make sure within, obvious limits that you're doing what you can to provide them those services and tell them, hey, how's the coffee going? And, do we have enough? So it's just really important to do those little things because obviously we're providing them their home. This is their home. So the little things are important to them. Also provide a prompt response to concerns. I mean, and I know none of us want to work 24/7, have a great team of administrator designees that can also take calls that are also very person-centered so that they can handle grievances and concerns. And sometimes they just want to be heard. The residents and the families just want to be heard. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the top things.
Yeah. I think a lot of places, when a family member doesn't feel heard or they don't feel like they're informed, that's when they're going to go to the state. When things get difficult, I had a complaint filed with the state because I got short with the family. On a Saturday morning, they called me 14 times to tell me their mom's socks didn't match. So I got snippy with the family. I said, for God's sakes, you need to move her out, I guess. I don't know what to tell you, And the problem was, one was light pink and one was dark pink. So I probably should have known that family a little better. So that's one of my examples, But when I got called 14 times, the way my phone was organized, 14 went to the office. She called my cell phone 14 times. So I got 32 messages over pink socks, So they're trivial, but I could have known her better. And her mother's behavior was changing, and I did not communicate effectively with them on those points. Their mother was barely keeping clothes on, and we didn't want to shed that light on their mom to their family member because it's kind of embarrassing, I wanted to tell them, are you kidding me? She has mismatched socks. We can barely keep clothes on that lady half the time, So if I would have been better about keeping that family involved in the process of the changes and the difficult times, you should be reporting to your family that, yes, your mother's not taking her meds. Yes, that kind of thing. Your mother wants to sleep all day. Before they get there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and they keep seeing her in bed, that shows a family that your care staff is slacking. But if you would have taken the proactive step to tell them your mom is wanting to sleep all day, that's a way dementia people check out of this world as they keep sleeping more. That will avoid it by just being open. Like Katie said, involve your ombudsman right when it gets difficult. Right when things get difficult, involve them, because some people wait till the last minute to involve the ombudsman. Right from the beginning, you get them involved, which greatly helps their process, because they're going to get called in anyway. When it gets filed with the state, they're going to be called. And then often the state health department will just turn around and say, did you try to take care of this at the state level? You have to keep good documentation when things get difficult. I used to tell my staff, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. I don't want my staff coming to me that said, you know what, she's been spitting on me for 6 weeks when I tried to give her a shower. Where's the documentation? I don't have it, it didn't happen. So if your staff aren't going to document difficult behaviors, then you're going to have a tough time backing it up to show people that this is what's the process. Her dementia's changing, she doesn't want to be here, that kind of stuff. And you need to be upfront with your external service providers on all of that information. And I'll let Katie give some comments on when things get difficult.
Sure. Yeah, I think like the ladies already mentioned, communication is key. So I think even if you just have the time to respond to a family member or whoever's contacting you with their concern, even just a quick phone call or an email to say, I got your concern, and I just need I need an hour, or I need a day, or I need a couple days to look into it, and I'll get back to you. Even just responding in that sort of way to let them know you're acknowledging that you've got that concern and you will be getting back in touch with them, I think goes a really long way. A lot of times we get the calls of the Ombudsman program when family members feel like exactly what these ladies have said, like they're not being heard, or I've left several messages and sent several emails to the administrator and I'm not getting a call back, or I'm not getting a response. And that's what really escalates an upset family member to then contact us and get us involved, which is not always a bad thing. Again, we're there to advocate for the resident, so if we are getting a call, we'll go out, we'll meet with the resident and try to see if they share that same concern, and hopefully we can kind of eliminate any further issues from that point on. If we can identify what's going on and then help to work towards a solution, that's what we want to be there to do. But again, we are resident directed, so we will go out to verify that the resident, in fact, does share that concern. Family members all the time have their own concerns about what they believe their parents or their loved ones should or should not be doing. If a resident does not share in that concern, we will not be advocating for that, but we will help to educate that family member on a resident's rights, and that the resident does have the choice to make some of those decisions, maybe not to follow doctor's orders or not to follow that diabetic diet. And we can kind of help be that educational piece for you to really help shed some light for family members that even though your loved one has moved into an assisted living, they still have rights and they still have choices, and we want to honor that and empower them as much as possible. So communication is key. I cannot say that enough. Communicate, communicate, communicate with your families, with your residents, with people who are involved, your providers. It really eliminates the need for them to then be disgruntled and come to the Ombudsman program and say, this is what's going on, I'm really frustrated. And like Janet said, if you've got a difficult situation kind of bubbling up in your home, please contact your local ombudsman. Please just say, hey, we're a little bit worried about where this is headed, or we think that this could be looking like it's going down the road to a 30-day discharge. What recommendations do you have? Do you have any suggestions? Because again, if that family is going to push back hard on a 30-day notice and involve us, we're going to come in and want to make sure that you've checked those boxes. What have you tried? What have you gone through to try and resolve this prior to getting to the point of involuntary discharge? So the sooner you can loop us in and kind of favor that proactive relationship, the better. Just because otherwise we are going to come back and ask you all those questions, and if none of those things have been tried, we're going to push back pretty hard to make you rescind that discharge notice and try some of those things before you ultimately try to discharge that individual from your home. Again, we are not regulatory, so we don't have any authority at the end of the day. We can just be a thorn in your side who will continue to ask the question, be kind of annoying with, what have you tried, what have you done, can you do this? But at the end of the day, you can choose not to listen to the ombudsman. That's not what I would recommend, but you don't have to.
I don't know if any of you have had complaint surveys filed. I have, and it's not pretty at the end of the day. One of my staff shared with the family member, your mom's not appropriate for this home and I think you need to move her out. I got dinged for not giving them a 30-day notice. The state shows up for 8 hours on complaint surveys at a minimum. And then they go through everything. That should have never happened. My staff should have never, since then I started training staff that says, you don't have the authority to tell anyone that their mom is not appropriate for this house. And dementia care is hard, I get it. And they also have to have time to adjust. The other people that throw complaints are your staff. They do, and they can use that against you. What you can't do is you can't hold them to one standard and you are able to do the other. My staff, I had to work a shift. I forgot to sign the stupid patch you put on their knee, and staff found it because I didn't date it, and she goes, do you want to come back and sign off on it? And I thought, should I do that? Should I not do that? And I said, you know what, I think you need to enjoy writing the med error up for me. And you can take a picture and you can send it to everybody, because I left the shift and I did not sign the patch and date it. So I wasn't comfortable, allowing myself to go back and sign off on meds and that kind of stuff, because you're leading in a way that's going to catch up with you sometime. Your staff, when they get disgruntled, what if you fire staff over med errors and you made a gazillion and they know it? They're gonna rat you out quick as anything, So if you're asking them to follow the rules, then you gotta follow the You know, you're asking them to be on time for work, but when you're relieving them for a shift, you call and say, sorry, I can't get there for 45 minutes. That only aggravates staff, because all of our staff work really hard. But when the manager is allowed to fudge, you know, like you ask them to pre-pour meds because you're short on staff, but when you found them pre-pour in meds because their day wouldn't go so well, and you can't pre-pour meds, they're gonna remember you did when we were short-staffed, you know. But I never pre-poured meds. That's just an example.
Do we have any questions so far?
I actually do. What do you do if you have no, What do you do if you have no ombudsman? I know that we have a phone number to call and stuff like that, but if we don't have any local ombudsman, I love an ombudsman, so I don't have a problem with that, but what do you do besides the phone number?
What region are you? What region are you in?
Southeast?
Southeast Colorado? You can, I'll leave my business card. You can contact me and I can connect you to the ombudsman program for that region in the state. They might just be in flux and be looking to hire someone. I'm not quite sure, but I'm happy to connect you to the appropriate person. And we do always have a state ombudsman as well. So push comes to shove, if you're without a local for a time period, you always have a state ombudsman. And at the Denver Regional Council of Governments, so if you're outside of the Denver metro region, but let's just say you just need some general consultation on maybe how to handle something, please know that you can always contact us too. We have an ombudsman Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, answering calls. So if you just need some general guidance or advice, please don't hesitate to call no matter where you're located in the state.
I have a quick question. Would you describe your professional relationship as an ombudsman with CDPHE?
Sure.
What is the conversations? When do they call you? When do you call them?
Sure.
Are they your bosses? Just kind of describe the overview of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do not have any formal connection to CDPHE. We are not employees of the state. The ombudsman program is federally mandated. We have a state ombudsman who oversees the entire state of Colorado. And then by region, we have local ombudsman programs that are typically housed in your area agency on aging. So your AAAs, so that's Dr. Cog is the AAA for the Denver Metro. That's where our local program is housed. In terms of our relationship with the health department, typically they will, and I shouldn't even say typically because nothing is typical anymore. Prior to COVID, if they were going to be going out and just doing an annual survey at an assisted living, they would reach out to us and just ask us, when's the last time we visited? When's the last time we went to resident council? Do we have any concerns? Are we aware of any inappropriate discharges? That kind of thing. They'll just gather some general information from us and we'll do the best we can to provide that. I will be honest with you, that has not been happening as of late. So we typically don't know when they are going out to do a survey at an assisted living home anymore. And we are bound by confidentiality that if we do know they're going out, we cannot share that information. The only time that we will share specific information with the health department surveyor is if we have permission to do so. So if we worked with a resident or a family member, and let's say that we were unable to resolve the issue, and they gave us permission to share that with the health department, then we could do so. But otherwise, we can only give very general information about observations that we make during visits, and that sort of thing. So typically the health department, I've noticed as of late, really is kind of relying heavily on our program to help field some of those complaints that they think could be handled at a lower level that don't need to rise to the formal complaint level. So I know that the person who's taking intake over at the health department will oftentimes ask, have you contacted the ombudsman? Have you tried working with the ombudsman and involved them? And sometimes families have and sometimes they haven't, but they are encouraging folks to do that. So I think they really see us as kind of that, please work with your ombudsman before you come to us, and we want to be that as well too. You know, we really like to be that first level of taking care of the issue if we can before it rises to the level of a formal complaint. If we have to educate a consumer that they have the right to file that complaint, we will do so.
One of the areas we wanted to talk about is your external service providers. External service providers are under the same code of ethics as we are. They are mandatory reporters. So if your hospice sees some goofy stuff going on, they are going to report it. So you want to have good relationships with your external service providers, because perhaps they could have notified you, you know, if you had good relationships with them, they could, you know, kind of say, hey, you know, one of your caregivers probably needs some retraining in patients with dementia care, you know, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
About external service providers. One trend I know that we're starting to see that I've also heard is that the important part of having a good relationship with them is the health department surveyor will talk to them if they come in to see a resident while they're surveying, and they will ask them, do you have a good relationship? Do you have any concerns? Do you think this person is appropriate for assisted living level of care? So if you aren't in good communication with your external service providers, and that provider feels as if this person is not suitable for assisted living level of care, you're kind of in trouble right off the bat. And so to have really open communication with them is very important, and having those hospice contracts is really important as well, because that protects us and the hospice agency and the resident when we're in these working relationships. And just another note about the ombudsman that I think has been a huge lifesaver is that as we all embrace and put our arms around person-centered care as Medicaid providers, talk about a group of people that its whole focus is person-centeredness. It's your ombudsman. And they are vital and have been amazing in training my staff and speaking with families who are like, hey, I don't want that person to smoke. She hasn't smoked in 22 years. She comes to your assisted living and all of a sudden she wants me to buy her a pack of cigarettes. Like, you can't, you know, can't let her smoke. And getting the ombudsman involved in that conversation about, you know, resident rights. And so use them, they're amazing tools. And if you have any questions on person-centered care, they do free training, which is so great for your staff, so great for your families, so great for your residents.
We had a question back there.
So this is just a general question. It might have been better for Steve, but what are really the true consequences of a complaint? Like, how far backwards should we bend for like a disgruntled staff member to try and get them to not give a complaint, or a family member? Does it always turn into a disaster, and how much bending over backwards should we do?
You know what, I don't know exactly the answer to that. A family member can file a complaint at any time. Is it substantiated? Well, you know, I'm not sure if miscolored socks is substantiated, but you know, staff's telling somebody to get their mom out, she's not appropriate, and that, you know, that's borderline grade too. So it's hard. Once it's filed with the state, they do have to explore it. They do. They're under guidance. They have to explore every complaint that comes in. I think last year's number of complaints was 280. That's way too many. It was way up because of COVID. That's way too many. About a third of those are probably ones that should not have been filed. You know, that were not to the level that it couldn't have been taken care of at the facility. One of the issues
Only 60% were founded though. So they're not coming out, when they come out and do these, they're not finding something every time. So I think that should provide us a little bit of comfort, because Steve did offer a slide in one of his presentations for the top 10 deficiencies, and he talked about surveys, and maybe we can get more recent data and share with all of you. But I think it was 60% were founded, which means 40% were not founded. So I think just make sure you're documenting correctly. You know, have a good relationship with your residents and families when they come out. And hopefully some of those smaller trivial ones will kind of, you know, you'll be in the 40%, not the 60%. The other thing I can say from my experience, it can be a juggling act working with the ombudsman and with CDPH&E. And I think sometimes CDPH&E can be very focused on protective oversight and protecting your residents. And so sometimes that doesn't always honor what we might think their resident rights are. And it also might not honor what the ombudsman believes is their right. And so oftentimes too, really taking those concerns directly to Dee and Steve, because at the end of the day, even if we're juggling and we believe more on the side of what the ombudsman believes. They are the ones that license us. And so I would take it directly to Dee and Steve because they do know it's a problem. And hopefully they can support you in making the right decision.
One of the examples I had for an external service provider is I had a hospice nurse that gave us a PRN order for mood-altering drugs. I tried to explain to her we're not able to do that. She put it on there anyway and said, I'll come out and give it to him. I'm like, okay, so you're gonna come out and give it to him. You're gonna sign, you're gonna do it. Well, then all of a sudden she's not available at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She doesn't wanna come out and give the med. So I held the med. I said, staff cannot give that. We are holding the med. I told you in the beginning that was not allowed. So I ended up calling the hospice on Monday and saying, give me a different hospice nurse. She's trying to ask me to break regs. Then now she's upset because now I'm throwing her on the bus. I'm calling you to say, hey, she told us that she'd be out here and she's not. So if your situation goes sideways with an external provider, or you have a bath aide in there that you think is too rough with the resident, call the manager of the hospice or the home care company and say, you know what, it's not personal. I just think we need somebody else in here. If you've got a hospice aide, then your staff does not get along with them. There's other bath aides you can use. Just, you don't need to have more stress in the home by having service providers in there that don't get along with your staff or vice versa. Just remedy the problem before it escalates to a point that your staff and that person don't get along or something.
And more importantly, if your resident doesn't get along with that external provider, because I see that a lot too. I don't feel comfortable with this bath aide. They're short, they don't listen to me. Like, at that moment in time, again, we have to advocate for our resident. And so just remember, that's our biggest strength is to advocate for what they want. And with external providers, whether it's you have rounding doctors coming in, make sure that you're providing them with options and choices with those providers, Bloom, Senior Care, like, make sure it's just they have choices and options. Because that's another place you're gonna get in a really sticky situation is if you're not honoring their desire to look for care by other people.
And then if you have families private paying care that comes in, make sure that family's happy with the caregiver they got provided because they're the one paying the bill at $25 to $45 an hour for somebody to come in and be their mom's companion. So, just talk to your service provider. I used a company and I used to tell them, don't be sending me anybody that's not trained in dementia cares because I'm not interested in training your staff. I can barely get mine trained. So no wackadoodles from your end because I'm paying. Sometimes you can pay external service providers to provide an added layer of support. If you got somebody that took a turn for the worse, came home from the hospital, you can hire an external service provider to meet staffing levels. They can't be there by themselves, but you can add supplementary staff to meet staffing levels because that lady's only going to have a temporary problem, of a couple days and PT's coming in. Even if you don't get along with the PT people, get a different one in there before it explodes on you. Or the lady doesn't like her physical therapist and she won't participate. If you've got a resident, they only get X amount of days to participate in physical therapy. If they show no progress, they're out. But if the little lady is just, like a little snippy one that says, well, I don't like them, that's why I'm not going to participate because I don't like him. We'll get a different one so that if she doesn't participate for the next one, you can show she did not want to participate in physical therapy. She's not getting better. Now I'm going to have to discharge her because she's over what we can provide care here for. But you have to document it, and you have to give somebody a chance to work with someone else. If they don't like the speech therapist that comes out to see if they can swallow right, and ask for another evaluation. Be the advocate for the resident so they at least get the opportunity to improve their strength so they can stay in your facility.
Any other questions so far before
I just want to make a couple of additions. The one thing that I learned is have your ombudsman know you and know your facility. Because if they get to know you and they know that you do a good job and they see you, when somebody comes in with a question or a complaint, they're going to know the services that you're able to provide. And they're going to have a relationship to know she's tried. We know that they're running a good ship or whatever. The other thing I found too, let your families know what you have done to remedy the situation. Let them know. So when so-and-so is complaining about this, you could say to them, this is what we've tried, this is what we've done. So it lets the families know that you are working with them, not that it's just, well, she keeps complaining and we don't know what to do. Let them know the things that you have tried to do. The other thing I wanted to ask too, when you, being an ombudsman, if you walk in and you were to see a situation where you saw it wasn't necessarily the person you were coming to see, but you saw a staff member, say, acting out towards another resident, or you saw things that you knew weren't correct, how would you approach that? Would you go to them, or would you go to CDPHE and say there's a problem? How would you approach that?
So, I mean, every situation is going to be different, of course. Generally though, because we are resident directed, we have to have resident permission before we would address it with anyone else. So if we observed something that we were concerned about, we would try to talk with that resident directly before doing anything else. You know, saying, hey, I witnessed your interaction with, you know, so-and-so caregiver. Is that okay? Is that typical? How does that make you feel? I mean, we're gonna ask questions to try and see if the resident has concerns about it, and if they do, and they give us permission, we're gonna come to you as the administrator first and foremost to address it right then and there. If we are truly witnessing something that is like, we walk in and a staff member is like verbally abusing a resident right there on the spot, we're gonna intervene and say, stop, you know, and try to make sure that the resident is safe, and then we're gonna have a conversation with you as the administrator right then and there. Typically, the only time the ombudsman is going to go right to filing a complaint with the health department would be if we show up to a small board and care home and there's no staff present. Believe it or not, that has happened to us many a times. So we show up, you don't have a staff member present in the building, we're calling the health department right then and there. Typically though, we're not contacting the health department automatically. We are always going to utilize the proper channels and try to, with resident permission, address a specific concern with you, or if it's a systemic issue in your home, address it with you, and if it's something we continue to see when we go out, at that point we're going to involve the health department. So there's a home in the Denver metro area that has their caregivers living in an RV outside of the home. It's concerning. They're not present in the home providing protective oversight 24/7 as they're required to do. They're not always available to provide medications. It's something we've tried to address countless times with the administrator. It's not changing. At that point, we're probably going to involve the health department to let them know what's going on. But we will always try to resolve it with you, the administrator, first before just going right to the state. That's not what we're there to do. We're not punitive. We're not regulatory. We're not there to get you in trouble. We're there to advocate for your residents. Okay? The only other thing I would add would be you as a provider have more rights prior to discharge or prior to admission than you do at any point after that. Once you admit your resident, you are bound to keep that person safe, and if you cannot, you have to provide for a safe discharge. And that's where we find providers getting into these really sticky situations, is maybe you admit somebody without doing a really thorough assessment of that individual, and then you find out maybe a couple days into it, a week down the road, oh my gosh, who did I just move into my house? What am I going to do? And your rights as a provider are really limited at that point because you have admitted this person to your care. So please just know that your admission assessment is probably the best tool you have to protect yourself as a provider and make sure that you are not bringing somebody into your community or your home that is not going to be a good fit or appropriate for the level of care you can provide. And the other thing that we are seeing so much of nowadays is, like we talked about in the beginning, not overselling what it is you can provide. So please just be honest with folks that are looking to move a loved one into your home. I can't tell you how many calls we get from very upset family members that are saying, I was told my mom was going to get this, and this, and none of that has happened, and we're paying $8,000 a month, and she can't even get a shower. So just be realistic with your families. I know it's hard right now, but the more you can just be upfront about the challenges that you guys might be facing, and just being really real with them about what they can expect and what you can honestly provide on a day-to-day basis, the better. Then you're not setting somebody up for that chandelier effect. You're promising them the sun, the moon, and the stars. They move in and they're not seeing any of that, and then they're mad. So that's some of my recommendations as an ombudsman.
I'll tap along with that. I had admitted a resident this year, and I unfortunately did not do a very thorough, pre-admission.
And I guess the family was really playing it out like she was a great person. Great, you know, we know how that is. We don't get all the information sometimes when we admit a resident. Then you get the resident in, like you said. I was like, oh God, my staff hate me. I don't know what to do. I'm trying to give them all the resources possible to keep them motivated to take care of this person because she's making us second guess like our skill level and what we do. And I'm also thinking, oh my God, you know, am I not doing the best work here? Of course I am. But it's just that they have a mother who is very difficult. You will never please this person. And thankfully, we got a very good, successful discharge at the beginning of the month, which I was like, hallelujah. My staff is thanking me left and right. We're back to normal. We're going to do some therapy. We'll get through this. But, you know, you have to interview everybody besides the family sometimes. I think it's really important because you get into these situations and like you said, I'm stuck with this person, and then just thankfully this nursing home was able to take this person at the last minute, which I didn't know there's a lot of waiting lists for nursing homes right now. And so it was just, everything worked out in my cards, and I didn't even have to get the ombudsman, but I was very transparent. I've always been transparent with my families. I love when we have med errors, and you get to call the families, and you're like, guess what? I have another med error on the same person. And they actually ask, and this is just an idea or thought for you guys, is to let your staff make that phone call first. Hold them accountable, because guess what? Are they going to want to make that mistake again? No. So I do that, and my families, they actually expect that now. And I think for me, again, being transparent and saying we are human, we make mistakes, we all make mistakes, but they appreciate that, you know, and there's no complaints. You know, if there is a complaint, they talk to me directly about it, and we try to resolve it right away. So,
I think the pre-admission stuff that Rachel said, we're starting to notice, and it's going to be part of our next QMP actually, is that we're just not doing one assessment. And I know sometimes when someone's like in the hospital looking to discharge, and maybe you're competing with other assisted livings for the resident, but for us, it is honoring the resident and the resident's family for me to be ensured that I can provide what your loved one needs. So we're doing it in a couple stages. So we'll go out, we'll meet the family, we'll meet the resident, and then I'll say, hey, do you mind if I just pop in tomorrow morning? And you guys don't need to be here. Like the family doesn't need to be there. And I do that on purpose, and this is why. Because what we start noticing is family will answer the question for the resident. And you're really not seeing the resident themselves. So when I meet with them the second time, I ask some of those hard questions. What things make you sad? What things make you mad? What are you looking for in a home? What can we do for you? And ask some of those questions toward maybe just one-on-one with them if they can respond to you, so that the family isn't doing the assessment for the residents. And that has been extremely helpful with us having successful admissions. We recently went to an admission assessment. We met with them the first time. The family literally talked for this person. And when we were getting up ready to leave, like she was walking out, and under her breath, it was just this constant, like she was angry, and so sometimes you really have to get to know that person. But it's hard when you're competing, it's hard when the hospital wants to discharge them quickly. But for us, I think a good solid assessment is gonna be the only thing that's gonna save us in the future.
We talked a lot about assessments and not taking people over what you can care for. There seems to be a real challenge on hospital discharges. Somebody went into the hospital walking and they're no longer walking. And you can't take them back unless you can provide care for them. And the hospital's job is to get them stable. And they often tell you, oh yeah, she's walking around. Go to the hospital and make sure she's walking. And then when the hospital, they're gonna get a little rough with you and say, you have to take her back. And said, I don't have to take her back. My regulations say I have to provide protective oversight. She's no longer walking, because once she's back in your building, she's your issue, or he's your issue. And there may be a waiting list for 30 days to get her into a nursing home. Guess who's hiring private duty to help care for somebody that's really, taking a turn for the worse. So you really have to, if you need some rough skin, when you're calling the ER doc to say, you know what, you're not sending her back. And he said, I'm sending her back. I said, keep the bed warm. I'm sending her back. And I'm not opening the door for the ambulance driver. So, and they get really rough on you because you're considered dumping on them in a hospital. But the resident is not appropriate for your care. And people get afraid of doctors. We've all been trained to respect doctors and nurses and this kind of stuff. But make it worth your while to go to the hospital. And my true love is marketing. Do some backdoor marketing while you're there. Bring donuts for the nurses station. Let them know how great you are, so that you might be able to pick up a resident from the discharge planners sometimes. But do your due diligence on a readmission, just like it is a regular admission. And like Nicole said, I took care of dementia residents, and family always want me to do an assessment at 10 in the morning because that's Mom's awesome time. And I'd say, how about 3 o'clock in the afternoon? They'd be like, oh, she gets a nap then. Well, that's okay. I said, I can wait, and I'll just visit with the facility. She'll wake up sometime, but I always did. Dementia assessments were always in the afternoon because everybody's sundowns. They're all, nice in the morning. And then if you really have a doubt, invite that mom over or that dad over for lunch and see how they're going to do in your environment, that kind of thing. Some places call that a fellowship, where they invite them for the day. You do have to have emergency contact information. You probably don't want to be serving meds to that person during that time because you don't have orders and all that stuff. But you can do a 2-hour, meet and greet in my house and see how she does. Because it's always interesting with dementia residents to watch the daughter leave and see what Mom's going to do. And the true colors come out when, well, your daughter's leaving, but guess what? You're not.
Just one final plug for the Ombudsman. If you are in the Denver metro region, we do provide free staff training, like I said. So if you need that for your staff, please reach out to us. We've developed a number of really great trainings. One that we've been utilizing heavily lately is professional boundaries, which seems to be a great need for everyone, I would say, but certainly for your folks and your staff that are working with some of those really challenging residents, like the woman spoke about earlier, who's never going to be happy with anything. Your staff need to know how to hold a boundary with that type of resident, or it will eat, that resident will eat your staff alive and your other residents. And not saying that we're the experts on that, but those are the folks that we talk to most often, as you can imagine. So we like to think that we have a good understanding of how to work with individuals like that, residents and families, and we'd love to share some of those tips and tools with your staff if you think that that would be helpful. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. We want to be a resource for you guys. We want you to be successful because we depend on you for our residents. So thank you for all you do.
Let's give these ladies a hand. Thank you so much.